Our final guest this evening has been awarded the Columbia Journal Fiction Prize, the Sean O'Fallon Story Prize, the Dramineer Flash Fiction Prize, and the Kelly Barnhill Microfiction Prize. She has also been a finalist or runner-up for the Iowa Short Fiction Award, Smoke Long Quarterly Award, Bath Flash Fiction Award, Indiana Review Half K Prize, and many more. And her work has appeared in an assortment of literary journals, including the Kenyon Review, the New England Review, and others. She is also grateful to every one of them. Tuesday Funk is her very favorite place to read. How nice of you. And so she is very happy to be back. Please give a warm welcome to Molly Dumbleton.
Last year I did this totally short, vague bio, and my friends were like, "Don't do that. You have to put your stuff in there." So that's why it was. Hi.
Hey.
Such a little cozy audience here today. Mine is going to be really short, so I think we'll all be home before the ice. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Andrew and Eden, and Tuesday Funk, and you guys were all amazing. I am going to read two things. One of them is sort of an old thing that I wrote in 2013 and was published in Kenyon Review, and this other one is a brand new thing that actually is going, it is Hannah Gordon here? No, okay, she's the managing editor of Cheap Pop, and she saw me on Twitter and was like, I'm gonna be there, because the second one I'm gonna do is super short, and it's going up at Cheap Pop in like 2 weeks. It's like 3 sentences long, it's itty bitty. So they're both very, very short. I'm always super nervous at the beginning, but like it'll level out, so don't worry, I won't pass out. I didn't know what to read, so I read a bunch of stuff to my daughter and had her choose. So these are like, she's like on the verge of turning 13, so these are both like total downers. They're like the darkest, they're both really dark, and they both have car crashes in them, so be careful on the way home. Okay, so I don't know how people feel about sort of like having the magic stolen, but both of these stories, this isn't that common for me, but both of these stories originated from prompts from like writing classes. So do you want to know what the prompts are? Or are you going to be like, no, there's no magic find out? There's totally people like vehemently shaking no. So I'm going to not tell, but some people say yes.
Tell them after.
Tell them after?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, do we like that?
I like that.
Okay. Sure. All right, so the first one is whatever. The second one's tiny and the first one's medium. Okay, this one is called If She Were to Lay Down. That's my mom, she knows this one.
And I'm taking a video.
She is taking a video. Probably show my daughter who is a minor and therefore not invited. Okay, if she were to lay down. Sarah couldn't help but think that even at the age of 24, Jesse bore the exact shape of a grizzly. He was bushy-haired and barrel-chested with thick forearms and a belly like the bulge of an old-fashioned cash register, stopped short at the belt. Most days in town you could find him sitting on the overturned, sun-bleached canoe that had been in front of the general store for as long as anyone could remember, playing his dad's old banjo and making small talk with the men who'd come down to town, pretending to need a torque wrench when all they really needed was some time away from the ferreting attention of their wives. Jesse could be counted on to offer a cigarette, and by the end of it, the man would feel better, touching the lid of his cap as he shuffled on into the store or sometimes just headed right back to his truck. The ladies just smiled at his compliments. Hey, Jesse, they'd say, and the tempo of a skirt's swish might speed or slow to match up with whatever little riff he plucked out for them as they passed. But here he was on Sarah's couch, shirtless and passed out, face down, thick arms stretched out above him, the rest of him under a sandy old Mexican blanket she normally kept in the back of her car for picnics or trips to the beach. Prone like that, and flattened out because his gut and flattened out because his gut nestled invisibly down into the cushions. He looked almost normal size. But his black metal-toed boots lined up tidily next to him, heels tucked up against the couch corner, were huge. He was one of those men you simply couldn't reconcile with the child version of him in a family photo. And it was nearly impossible to look at his face now and sketch in the features of the boy that he had been. He hadn't been a kid when he pulled that baby from the car on fire. People in town were wrong about that when they always said, just a kid, he was just a kid. He'd been 19, and that's not a kid. She'd known him then. She supposed she'd known him always, and he just wasn't. In lots of places she knew about, 19 was a father's age. And maybe that's what made him so able to do it without even hesitating. But whatever was or wasn't in him that day, a burly kid out front of the hardware store, loading peat or chicken feed into your truck, it wasn't in this soft, sleeping man anymore. From the doorway, in her mind, she crossed to him and sat on the low table beside him, leaned in, letting the backs of her fingers run gently down the beard on his cheek, across to where the hair curled at the spot behind his ear, and up around the back of his neck. In town, they'd said he hadn't been able to unbuckle the car seat, had nearly caught fire himself trying, and finally just took hold and ripped the thing right out of that stupid hot pink car, the whole thing, and the section of seat it was attached to. One rumor said he'd scooped that baby boy right out even though he was already burning. And when they got to the hospital, Jessie and that baby had been nearly seared together, and the baby had stopped crying before they even got there. Jessie must have felt her looking at him, because without even twitching or stretching, he was awake. Eyes open, bloodshot, but clear. "Come here," he said, without lifting his head. He pulled an arm down and patted the coffee table. She hesitated. "I always wanted to sleep on your couch," he smiled, then pushed himself up onto his elbow. She went. She sat. The gentle intimacy of a morning let him touch her leg then, and let her let him, until he touched the end of the little cotton belt of her dress. She could smell the beach on her old blanket, but beyond that, what his neck would smell like if she were to rest her face there, and she could guess at the strength he would put into looping a forearm behind the small of her back, if he ever did. She could also guess at the softness that would come over him if she were to lay down with him there. She knew about the things that come out of men when you lie down with them in a cotton dress, when you let them touch your body on the outside of the dress, not because there's sex there, but because there's sadness. It's wonderful. The other one is actually 3 paragraphs, and each of the paragraphs is just one sentence, and it's brand new. This is called Just After Joy. Okay. In her hometown, when Melody was 13, a 19-year-old flipped his Trans Am on the highway feeder. See, I told you. Flipped his Trans Am on the highway feeder road right outside of the main entrance to the mall where Melody used to get dropped off to meet her friends at the food court outside the cinema multiplex. And the next day, the city news printed a picture of the upside-down car on the front page, which is where Melody saw it in black and white. The car fully upside down and teetering on its crumpled hood. There wasn't any blood or anything. That's hard to tell in black and white, so Melody looks extra hard just to be sure. But the story was that the boy had been speeding, really speeding, not just a little bit speeding the way your parents might if they were late to something, and tried to take that turn too tight. And so over it went, the Trans Am, all 3,000 pounds of it, with both its windows wide open, it being August, and the song My Hometown blaring from the radio as the car sat there rocking, upside down with a dead boy inside of it. Melody felt every inch of that story in her bones every time she passed that spot in the car with her parents for weeks afterward, even after the little pieces of glass and metal on the road gradually spread out and disappeared. And later too, when she was learning to drive. And as an adult, anytime she took a turn too tight. And even after that too, for the rest of her life really, whenever she started to get that feeling that you feel, that forever sort of soaring feeling, when it's August and late and you're alone and happy and free. Woo!
Yeah, we do.
Do you? Do you actually? Okay, I totally tell you. All right, so the first one is kind of a standard creative writing prompt that's actually completely awesome, and if you haven't tried it, you should. This particular one was in a workshop with 10 people, and so each person put just a noun, proper noun or common noun, right, on a piece of paper and folded them up, and then we put them in the middle of the table. Everybody wrote down the list of 10. And then you had to just incorporate those 10 nouns into your story. So that story was, I was trying desperately in the car on the way down to remember them. I think they were ferret, chicken, couch, wrench, hot pink car, family photo, canoe, banjo, cigarette, and cash register. Right? So, and then the second one was a really good prompt, and I don't feel like I quite met it, which was to think of a specific musical reference from 3 different decades, preferably that you've lived through, and then just craft a micro around like the one little snippet from the 60s, one snippet from the 70s, one snippet from the 80s or whatever. And so I wrote that one. That's actually a true thing. Do you remember when that car flipped outside of Crossgates in Albany, New York in the 80s? Because that one's true, and I didn't do the other 2.